Hello, my name's Julian Greystoke and I am a nerd. Some of you have asked me to do more movie reviews, so I figured I'd do one. I'm not going to guarantee that this is like the beginning of a trend or anything where I do movie reviews, but I'll start with one. The movie we're going to talk about today, obviously, is the D&D movie.
Anything you want to add?
I'm good.
Because as previously mentioned, I am a giant nerd, and yes, I do tabletop role-playing, as well as live-action role-playing. That's right, LARPing. I met my husband of 16 years while LARPing. So, that's the kind of nerd you are dealing with. So of course, when the D&D movie came out, we had to go see it, of course, and all of my nerdy friends have gone to see it, and they were all telling me it's amazing, it's so good, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, it's probably good, and it is good for a D&D movie, but is it good just as a movie in general? Well, let's talk about my thoughts. I don't even know how many thoughts I'm gonna have. I didn't write anything down. So, do I start with the plot or the characters? I don't know. I think maybe I'll start with the plot because the plot actually worked for me a little bit more than the characters did. The plot overall was really fun. Even though several elements were extremely predictable, like they were supposed to be, that was on purpose. And I'm not above enjoying a well-executed cheesy plot line. Of course that one guy was gonna turn out to be bad. Of course there is a tragic backstory TM with a dead wife. Why wouldn't there be? D&D Backstory 101, dead wife. But hey, at least they mixed it up with the daughter in the mix. So there was a little bit of changing things up while maintaining a fairly tried and true status quo. I also really enjoyed that the plot did not take itself too seriously. So even though there were big, giant, deadly stakes, it had the fun, charming feeling of more of a D&D session where the characters fail at things. I love seeing characters fail at things in a way that moves the plot and feels realistic. So they're trying to get in, they're trying to do this heist, and plan A fails, so they switch to plan B, and then they have plan C, which is plan A again under a different name. And that all felt natural in this movie, and it worked with the theming of D&D. You can almost imagine sometimes where somebody failed their dice roll. And I'm glad that they kept the plot fairly simple feeling while having a lot of stuff going on and things to do. It never felt like it was taking itself too seriously or was too overcomplicated. I feel like it took itself exactly the right amount of seriously. So it definitely wasn't all just goofs and gaffs. It was never I never felt worried for any of the characters. It never felt like there was real danger, and I think that was just kind of the tone they were going for, and I think they achieved it pretty well. Well, maybe should we do characters or dialogue first, because the dialogue was a bit hit or miss for me as well. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say about dialogue. It was hit or miss. Sometimes I did audibly laugh in this movie a couple of times, more than once, probably more than twice, but there were also some quips and banter that just fell flat, and I could tell they were trying too hard. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I do like that it was a goofy, quippy movie with a lot of character back and forth, but sometimes it felt like they were trying too hard with the quippiness, and I was just okay, you don't have to do that every 10 seconds. You don't have to have a quip for everything that is said. And I think that's also just kind of the tone of superhero movies, which this was reminiscent of our modern superhero movies. And so in our modern superhero movies, we like everybody to be very quippy. Thanks, Joss Whedon. But we don't need it. We don't need that much quippiness. It's okay. So, the characters were okay. They had the archetypes, and I like that. I like that they had the archetypes. We've got the main character who is the bard. His bestie is the barbarian. They also have a warlock, I think. I don't know all of the different categories of magic user in D&D. I don't actually play a lot of D&D. D&D is actually not my favorite tabletop game, so yeah, I'm not as knowledgeable about D&D, and there were probably some references that went over my head, even though I am familiar enough. I think I got most of the references. I might have missed some, but they had and they had a druid. So they had like the party, pretty classic. They also had a paladin there for a hot minute, but it was the paladin archetype of the GM has put a paladin into their party, like an NPC for a while, to like get them on the right track and help them out with a difficult portion of the quest before that paladin went down his way. So that reference I got completely. But they had the party, and I was like, I honestly wish that they had leaned harder into the archetypes. One thing I'm going to be talking about a little bit is comparing this to Vox Machina, which in my opinion is the quintessential D&D media that we have now or possibly have ever had.
I am very flammable!
I unequivocally really love Vox Machina as a show. I am not even familiar. I don't watch Critical Role. I tried, but watching other people play D&D is like painfully boring to me. But I'll watch an animated show that takes out all of the boring stuff. Vox Machina knows how to use the archetypes of the characters and build off of it. So those characters are all very, very moored in their archetypes of the barbarian, of the cleric, of the bard, but have built deeper characters within that archetype. And I don't think they leaned hard enough on the archetypes in the D&D movie. I wish they had leaned harder. Now, not that I want the bard to be running around humping everything in sight, but I wish that his bardiness had mattered more. Like, he played the lute a couple of times, never did anything magical, and that was kind of disappointing. I prefer the bard to be able to do things magically in the world with their bardic ability. Now, he was also the planner, he was the talker, although he was bad at it, usually, a lot of times. He was not actually that good at, like, talking to people, which is, you know, funny, but also I feel like they really dropped the ball with him as the bard archetype, and I wish they had gone harder.
So you make plans that fail?
No.
He also plays the lute.
Not relevant.
Same with all of them except for maybe Helga, was it her name? The barbarian. I liked her. She seemed to be pretty well positioned in her archetype. So her I really liked, but the others, the little magic user guy that they had, his whole arc was just that he had no self-confidence and he needed self-confidence. And that's fine, but it didn't really seem to suit him as a magic user in the party. Like, I wanted more from just the archetype of the magic user. And the druid, like, she didn't even have a character. She stood in the background most of the time. I kept waiting for her to have, like, depth or anything more to her. She's a tiefling who doesn't like humans. And then at the end, she's like, okay, I guess I like you guys. And it's like, they barely acknowledged you most of the time. Like, you had to get their attention. You were just trailing along. And of course, she had this uninhibited ability to go into, like, wild shape or whatever the transformation thing is called in D&D. And if this was a D&D game, I think she would have been more limited by, like, spells for the day or however it's done now. I don't know. I haven't played actual D&D in probably about, like, 2 generations of D&D, so I don't even know what the rules are anymore. I am old, okay? So, but she had unlimited access to her animal forms, and she could change them as much as she wanted, which was fine and fun, and I enjoyed it when she was allowed to do that, but at the same time, there were many moments when I was like, change into an animal. Change into an animal. She could solve this right now if she changed into an animal. And she didn't for plot reasons. And they did use her quite a bit, like at the beginning when they first got her, and at the end they used her quite a bit for the final, like, heist portion. But in the middle, it was just kind of like, change into an animal. Change into an animal. Like, when they were trying to, the bridge fell down and they were trying to figure out how to get across. I'm like, well, the rope thing, okay, but you don't need the barbarian to throw her axe when you have somebody who can change into, like, a giant eagle, fly the rope over there, and tie it to something. They found a different solution, but I was just sitting there going, why isn't she already a bird? Or even small moments, like when they were underwater and they were all swimming up, you get that shot of them all swimming upward. Why, just for me, why isn't she a fish? Why, or a dolphin swimming upward? Just for no other reason than visually, like, why wouldn't this character who has an unlimited ability to change into animals, not be nigh constantly changing into animals to make her life easier. I've seen this issue come up a lot in books that I'm reading as well, where the author will create a character who is sort of too powerful, like they have an ability that's too good. The Saviors series comes to mind with Layla and her teleportation abilities, which she just conveniently doesn't use sometimes. If you give a character an ability that's too good, you then are just kind of either just not using it when they should be using it, or finding excuses why they can't use it. Personally, I would have given her some limitations and be like, oh, I've changed into an animal too many times and I can't do it for a little while or something. But she was the most frustrating character to me because of the way that she was utilized, and I really wish that she had gotten more character within the movie. I love the villains. Villains are great, delightful. I honestly think that most of like the funny quips from the main villain, like the guy, worked the best of the quippiness most of the time.
All right, take me down. This is absurdly high. It's not what we discussed.
And finally, let's talk about the visuals, the special effects, all of that stuff. I thought they were pretty good. Pretty good. I was thrilled to see some of my favorite monsters. We got some dragons in this Dungeons and Dragons movie. I loved Chubby Dragon. He was great. The Chubby Dragon was great. But there was one scene where I was like, did we run out of budget? And that is when the tiefling, the druid, turns into a deer, and that was the worst looking CGI deer I think I've ever seen. It was atrocious. It was disgusting. I was like, what happened? We've got all these cool creatures going on, and we cannot get this CGI deer right. It looks like it's made out of jello. Its legs bent in unnatural ways. It's just like, did anyone who made this look at a deer first? It didn't even seem completely rendered. The fur texture was weird. So I don't know what was going on with that deer, but it felt very last minute. Otherwise though, I was pretty pleased with the effects. There were practical effects. I really liked seeing a lot of the creatures as practical effects. Oh, that's what I would have loved to see more of. Everything was very human, and so we only had creatures as side characters, and I would have loved, we had a tiefling, but she had little bitty horns and a little tail that you barely saw, and I was like, I want more fantasy races in my party. I don't just want humans and one girl with horns and one guy with very marginally pointy ears. Let me get some races. If we're gonna have goofy D&D stuff, I want a party made up of a bunch of where are my gnomes? Where are my dragonborns? I want variety in my party of adventurers. So that was a little bit disappointing, but I did like seeing a lot of the practical effects that were used as well as the CGI. Like I said at the end, especially I got to see some of my favorite monsters, so that was cool. They went a lot of cool places. So overall, all of the effects were good, except that deer. What happened with that deer? Yeah, I think those are all of my thoughts about the D&D movie. I thought it was fine. For a D&D movie, it was excellent. For a regular movie to go see, it was enjoyable. Not great or amazing or anything that I would be champing at the bit to necessarily own, but as a nerd, there was still plenty of stuff there for me to enjoy, plenty of references for me to get. And my friend came with us who does not play D&D, and she did not feel at all lost or confused. So that was good too. It's accessible to people who are not nerds and has enough nerdy stuff in it for those of us who are to be ha ha ha, look at that, oh, that's a monster that I loved. Pretty bland characters. And that's disappointing because the one thing about D&D is you crave what you get in Vox Machina, a very diverse party of very strong personalities and archetypes. That's what I say. But who am I? Actually, I'm an author, so if you'd like to read any of my books, see on my shelf back there, you can check them out on Amazon with a new book coming out very soon, I promise. I know I've been promising this forever, but it's coming out, or maybe it's out now, but probably not by the time this video goes up, but very soon, I promise. So check out my work, or support me on my Patreon, or commission me on my Ko-fi, and very, very soon, if not already, out my Fiverr, if you would like my editing services, or a coaching conversation with moi. Anyway, enough of that. Have you seen the D&D movie? Are you also a big old nerd? What did you think about it? Tell me in the comments below, or are you going to go see it? Are you excited to see it? Let me know. in the comments below. And I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Jimmy, Jim, Jimmy, Jim, 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 Jim.
I'm not Jimmy Jim, Jimmy Jim, 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 Jim. He's Jimmy Jim, Jimmy Jim, 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 Jim.
Actually, I don't think we have anyone here named Jim, Jimmy, Jim. But we do have several patrons. Patrons like Roma, Pansing Pony, Julius the Nice Dragon, Haley, Sam, Kiara, Kihokaro, Mooney, Maria, Kirsten, Bear, Jojo Bookish, Robin, Ursula, Caitlin, Jessica, KJ, Lafone, Amanda, Unicorn Jenny, Celia, Neon NVM, Alyssa, Rita, Deborah, Afra, Melissa, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Merween, Kit, Hidden Glade, Light Julie, Belle, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Ray, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, and Sarah.
And this is supposed to be a kids' movie.